For us, yes, most certainly, to reflect on what it is that we are going to pray. Sometimes, if we're not careful, we can almost see it as a renegotiation of what I've not met up in the last year. And sometimes, if we're not careful, and I've been there, there are some phrases, shall I say, I want to cough my way through, you know. I'll catch up with the rest of the congregation when they've got to the end of that sentence, because I'm not really sure I'm at that place. It is a covenant prayer that above and beyond all else is about who God is. It's not actually about us. It's not about me. It's not about you. It's about who God is. The faithful one who established a covenant, who reminds us of a covenant in Jesus and continues to fulfill that covenant. That, if you like, that deepest of all promises, that which cannot be broken. And it cannot be broken from God because God's very nature, as we often say when we share together in communion, is on His mercy we depend. It does not change. God does not change according to the seasons, nor does He change according to the century of the year. God is God, and it is upon that fact that our covenant is based. And then we feed into that our insecurities, our unwillingness, our unfaithfulness, knowing that this is an opportunity for us to restore and to renew, and for sometimes to take afresh what we mean in the words of the covenant prayer. In the Christian community, we're really good at doing. In fact, lots of our lives are based upon what we do. Hazel and I had a conversation as we travelled here this morning about the guilt that sometimes we can put each other under, about we really need people to fulfill a sense of duty, a sense of obligation. Without you, the church can't function. What is it that you're going to do in the life of the church? And believe you me, I'm not giving you an excuse to do nothing. But that's the easiest part for us often to focus our attention on. I think the hardest part of that covenant prayer is that part that says, Lord, if you choose for me to do nothing, if you choose to lay me aside, if you choose to sort of have for me I want to say a Sabbath year, a sabbatical time, a time when I can just take on board who you are that might enable me to become a better person. I think that's the hard thing for us to do. Because our whole identity is so often tied up and locked up in what we do. I was speaking to a really good friend last night, Roger. Well, somebody I'm renewing friendship with. Roger and I grew up together in our home church. Roger reminded me last night of the first ever sermon that I preached at the age of 13. Now, I can't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, let alone anything else, but Roger said, I could tell it to you back. It was, I stand at the door and knock. That was your sermon, and I'll have to try and remember what it is and preach it again one day. Roger has spent his life as a minister in the Assemblies of God, a very powerful preacher, a very significant teacher within that part of God's family. Until I think it was about 3 years ago that Roger was struck down with the neurological virus, which meant that he couldn't quite think in the same way, in the same capacity that his whole life had been on. And I'm going to spend some time with Roger in days, because he's had to learn what it is to have his identity, how he identifies himself, changed. You see, Roger, like me, from the age of probably our early 20s, our identity has been pastor of or reverend of. and what we do every day of the week, we can so easily have our identity wrapped up in that. You know that for me this is a significant year because I'll stop doing the things that I've done for the last 51 years. And I've got to tell you, there's part of me that is very nervous about discovering who the new me is going to be. Because my identity has been wrapped up in what I do. You see, from the age of 13, that wasn't when I just preached my first sermon, but at the age of 13 I recognized the call that God had laid on my life when I was 7 years of age. At the age of not quite 17, I became the pastor of a church. And since then, I am now, happy birthday to me, it was 68 on the 31st of December. Since then, that's all I've done is be in the life of the church. And I've had to, over those years, intentionally take time out to recognize it's not what I do, but I need to take time out to be. And maybe that's at the heart of what is this covenant service. Some of you know part of my story, which was after 20 years of serving within the same denomination, doing the same routine, being acknowledged for the gifts and the skills that I had. There came a moment when God said, I need you to stop doing that. And I thought he was going to say, and to do something else. But he didn't. He just said, I need you to stop doing that. And on the 3rd of January in 1995, I submitted my resignation from that denomination, expecting God, because I had been obedient to him, and so he was now going to open up a new, well, in fact, I thought he was going to open up double doors for me to walk through. I was that confident. And he said nothing. He just said, take time to rediscover not who I am, but who you can be in me. In that same period, I went out to Los Angeles to a conference and sat in the Crystal Cathedral at the end of a service, which I think I sobbed my heart out throughout most of the service because I was so confused and so bewildered as to what my future might be. The conference was called the Institute for Successful Christian Leaders. What a joke that was. And there I sat, absolutely bewildered and confused. After the service ended and I got up, the person behind me wrapped their big, huge arms around me and said to me, hey Melvyn, so wonderful to see you. Didn't think you'd be here. And it was a guy called Reverend Dr. Larry Williams, who I had met about 10 years previously. And Larry said to me, you know, I never heard back from you. I wrote to you before Christmas. Well, I hadn't had a letter from him. God bless the Royal Mail. And I said, well, what's it about? He said, I wrote to you, I want you to become my associate pastor. I thought, man, hey, God is a great God, isn't he? Went back to the UK, then flew out again in a few weeks' time to Philadelphia, spent some time with Larry and his wife Jerry, and at the church. It was a fabulous church. I was so welcomed. As I got on the plane back home, though, I knew that wasn't where God wanted me to be. And still he said, you need to learn to be and not to do. It was nearly 5 months before God actually told me what the next phase of my ministry was to be and what I was to do. I learned through a lot of tears and a lot of pain. Put me aside. Let me be used. Let me just be quiet. Do with me what you will. I surrender all became a deep reality to me. Thank you so much for choosing that this morning, Sandra. Because I surrender all actually meant I had to surrender the ability to be active, to be engaged. I became a Methodist minister, and about 7-8 years into that ministry, I had in my heart for 15 years prior to that, the deepest of all convictions that God was calling me to serve in the mission field that was the United States of America. I carried that for some 15 years. I'd learned what it was to share that calling with church leaders within a denomination and have them laugh at me. I'd learnt what it was to share that with people that were my spiritual counsel and advisors, and to have that affirmed in my heart and in my life. I held it very, very precious as a promise of God to me for the ministry that he had called me to. So in 2002, when I was on holiday with the family in Florida, I received a phone call from a bishop of the United States Methodist Church saying, "We've never met, but your name has come across my desk, and I've been asked to give you a call, and it may come as a shock to you, maybe something that you're not prepared for, but we'd like to invite you to come and look at a church opportunity that we have in Tampa." Well, the call came as a surprise in one element, but it didn't in another, because I'd been waiting 15 years for this call. And so Julie, I left the family in southern Florida, and I traveled to Tampa and met with a church there who invited me to become their preaching pastor. Spent the weekend with them, and on the Tuesday I was offered the post of being their preaching pastor. It was a fabulous church, 4 services over a Sunday, very vibrant indeed, offered me a wonderful financial package. Not the least was a 5-bedroomed house with a swimming pool. When I got back to the UK and shared that calling and that phone call with the circuit to which I was part of, very reluctantly, they agreed that I could curtail my appointment and accept the invitation to go to this church. I then had to go through district, and they affirmed that I should go to the connectional panel. When I went to the connectional panel and shared my heart, made myself so exceedingly vulnerable to them, I came away with confidence that God was in this. And so when 2 days later, I received a phone call followed up by a letter that said I was denied permission to go to this appointment, I was angry. I carried that anger for probably 3 months solid. I mean, speak to my kids, you didn't want to come near me at that time. I felt betrayed. I was furious with the Methodist Church. What right did they have to cut across what was God's will and purpose for my life? However, and I did consider quitting, however, I am a man under the discipline of the conference. And I had to accept the fact that if the conference said no, then no, it was. And I had to lay that before God. And I had to say, I believe you're in this, but I don't understand why this is happening. I believe that with a snap of heavenly fingers, you could change this decision. But I just have to rest in what you want. Now, since that time, I've been privileged and honoured to travel back to the States on numerous occasions to work with churches on missions, to do pastoral exchanges, and that ministry has been richly and deeply blessed by God. But God is no man's debtor, and there's something of an irony and something that causes me to smile on my heart, that my last ever appointment to a circuit in the Methodist Church, in active service before I asked permission to sit down, sees me living in a 5-bedroomed manse with a swimming pool. It's the only 5-bedroom manse with a swimming pool, to my knowledge, in the UK. In fact, when the circuit bought the house, we had to tell finance department, property department, it was a very big baptismal pool that we got. That bit's a joke, by the way. And I'd had to learn that sometimes it's more important to be than to do. So when we come in a few moments' time to share in the covenant prayer, please don't read it as an opportunity not to do anything, to opt out of whatever it is. I'm not giving you permission to literally retire and do nothing. But God does give us an invitation to step deeper into who he is, to depend more on his faithfulness than just to acknowledge our sense of unfaithfulness. It's an invite for us to not renegotiate, but to step into the depths of a promise that he has made for us, that he will neither forsake us nor leave us. I will be with you until the ends of the earth. The covenant prayer is not an easy prayer to make. And I'm going to say, and I'm going to be bold this morning to say, don't cough your way through it. Actually remain silent, because don't make a mockery of it. It is probably the deepest and the most meaningful prayer we are ever going to be called to make. It's the encapsulation of everything that we've been singing about in our worship so far. It's the movement of the Spirit in our hearts that we've been feeling in this worship. It's our response to a God who never changes. It's about stepping into who he is, that we might be. It's not easy. That's why it's a covenant prayer. Between Christmas and the New Year, I went to Buckfast Abbey. If you've never been to Buckfast Abbey, I absolutely recommend just go down there. Just feel the presence of God in this Cistercian monks who live there. They've just built, year before last, a wonderful new presentation of what it means to be a Cistercian monk, a Benedictine monk. I guess in my mind, monks withdraw from the world. I guess in my mind, they're sort of spiritual hermits in a sense. You know, they go into an enclosed community. They just pray 5 or 6, 7 times a day. They live a very simple life dependent upon the life of that community. It was only as I began to reflect and look at what has happened from lives that have in one sense have withdrawn, and I realised that so many scientific breakthroughs have come through over the years from the Benedictine and the Cistercian monks. So much of the great art in the world has come from the Benedictine and the Cistercian monks. So many of the breakthroughs of service of justice, challenging injustice, has come through those communities. People who in one sense are seen to be withdrawn from the world, seem to have had the ability to bless the world so much through what they do. And I was thinking about our covenant service and thought, because we want to win the world for Jesus, of course we want to pack this church to the gills, of course we want to declare who Jesus is loud and clear, but maybe we'll learn to do that best by taking time to be rather than time to do. And maybe in our time of reflection, as we look to making this prayer, we want to understand that we do it not in our own strength, we know that, but in a new and a fresh way. We're going to do it on God's grace, who calls you by name. His nature calls you by name. We're going to do it together. We're going to say the prayer together. But actually, I can't say the prayer for you. And you can't say the prayer for me. But the power of it will be that we say it in our own hearts to serve God. Just watch this video, will you, about grace.